What's up, Cavs fans? We are on Cavs Basketball Eve, if you will, with the latest episode of the Courtside with the Cavs podcast. Spencer German, Spencer Davies alongside as we get you ready for the start of the season, which tips off in New York on Wednesday. Spence, we're both going to be there too, which makes it even more exciting. So
how about it? How about it? A little boys road trip over to MSG, the basketball capital of the world, at Madison Square Garden. I cannot wait, man. That's going to be like one of those bucket list moments, and I'll be asking you to take 1,000 pictures. I guarantee it.
We're taking the show on the road. Same goes for you. Yeah, listen, like I want to hit on that really, really quickly here because I know people don't really care about, us as reporters covering this team, our like dreams and goals and all that. But I will say, covering a game at MSG is like a bucket list item. Like I pride myself on staying pretty even keel when it comes to like the sports fandom thing and like not getting too. I've always been like that since I kind of got into the business. Like, yes, there's been moments where you're crossing paths with somebody that you've always watched as a kid and you're like, holy crap, like this is really cool. But I try to stay composed. Covering a game at MSG, though, I can't hide the fact that that's a pretty damn cool thing to check off the bucket list because that building just has so much history and so many great basketball moments. It's going to be pretty cool walking in there as a credentialed member of the media for sure.
They call it the Mecca for a reason, man. And you're going to hear all of the in-game entertainment and announcing that you hear on TV in person. I can't wait, man. And I've never been to New York in general, so this is going to be a completely eye-opening experience for me just to see the hustle and bustle of this city, and it'll be interesting, man. I'm looking forward to going to MSG. I'm looking forward to going to Brooklyn and checking out the Barclays Center. I'll be there for that because I'm staying an extra couple of days. So I'm looking forward to this trip, man. It's gonna be different, and I can't wait. It's gonna be adventurous, so to speak.
Yeah, listen, I'm excited about both getting to make this trip together and do our show from MSG. And just have some fun with this and be able to cover this game. But also, I'm just excited in general about the season that's obviously about to kick off here. And I'm obviously excited that you get to stay for the extra game in Brooklyn. I unfortunately can't. But either way, I'm trying to make it work here because we know, Spence, this has a chance to be a really memorable Cavalier season with the way that things are set up, the roster that they have, how great they were last year two of Kenny Atkinson. And we're going to talk a little bit about that specifically coming up towards the end of the show because this is our official season preview show. We're going to do some fun stuff, some superlatives. We'll ask the question if Evan Mobley can actually ascend into the MVP conversation. And of course, as much as Spence hates doing them, we'll give you a prediction for the season in terms of how far the Cavs get this year. But before we get to all that, Spence, you were obviously at practice on Monday. And I think the big note that came out of it was the fact that it sounds like Darius Garland is way ahead of schedule on his recovery from the great left toe injury and the surgery that he had to repair it. What's the latest on that? And I guess how soon, from your sort of estimation, do you think we could see Darius based on what we initially thought was going to be maybe like a 10-game absence to start the year?
I think they're going to still stick to that. Okay. And that's just because the way that Kenny talked about this injury, yes, he admitted that he's probably ahead of schedule, but he's having conversations with Steven Spiro and the performance staff to find out where he is physically and conditioning-wise. I thought the most telling phrase that Kenny used is that it's not return to play, it's return to performance. And I think that's really interesting when it comes to injured players and getting back to the court and how they want them to be in shape, whether they're hitting these benchmarks, acceleration, deceleration, talking about just these different data points that they want to see in practice and then make an educated guess by comparing them to game film and other things that they see in game settings. So based on that, I would assume that Darius is still on the same plan. Okay. Even though he's playing in live practices and pretty much doing everything now, and he looks like he's moving well on his feet. He looks like DG. So that's a good sign for sure. I wouldn't think that the timeline changes at all, though.
And I'll say this, too. We've talked about this a little bit. I don't even think it, needs to necessarily change. There's no rush, in my opinion, there shouldn't be any rush to get him back out there. The biggest complaint that fans have about Darius, as we know, it's well documented, is that you get to the playoffs and he hasn't been able to perform on that stage. And usually that's been because he's been hurt in some capacity. And like we've talked a ton about how it's unfair to criticize him in some respects for the lack of playoff performances, because it has been largely injury driven and he hasn't just been able to be healthy that time of year. And so if he wants to buck that trend, if he wants to be out there at that time of year, I don't see an issue with, waiting this out and being patient with it and just getting him back when he's going to be back. I don't care as much about games in October and November as I do about games in, let's just call a spade here, like February, March, and April, and then obviously into the playoffs. That's when I want to see Darius playing at his best. And so if that means he sticks on the same game plan of 10-game absence, kind of just working his way back, I think that's huge. You bring up the conditioning piece. That's a huge thing here. Like I think we sometimes forget, just because a guy's like cleared to play or cleared to return, that the conditioning part of that, he won't have done as much as his teammates to this point in terms of getting ramped up for the season. I mean, Donovan talked about how he was doing stuff in July and in August before camp even opened up to get himself in game shape. And I'll tell you, the preseason game we were at last Tuesday, he looks like he's in midseason form already. Darius hasn't had that luxury because he had the surgery that he's been coming back from. So, yeah, I'm totally fine with them slow playing this because, again, you want to get Darius playing at his best at the end of the season and not try to rush him back just because, well, he's ahead of schedule and we like the benchmarks that he's reached. I'm totally fine with that. And I think that is probably the right way to handle this thing in by and large.
The example that Kenny used was like, yeah, he can come back and you can have him out there, but do you really want him going out there and going 1 of 8 from the field, shooting 20% and not being the DG we know until 10 games in and getting his rhythm and all that? So you can simulate it as best as you can in practice, but until you're actually in a game setting, in the 5-on-5, on TV, playing against a different opponent, then you're not really going to have that chance until you know. So they want to be dead sure, dead honest that he's ready to go and ready to perform, not just play. And that's the word that Kenny used. And plus, if you want to shift this a different direction, I think they take their time because they want Evan Mobley to get the handling reps and getting the playmaking reps that he would have without these guys. Potentially not having DeAndre Hunter available on Wednesday night in New York also kind of forces that hand. Like, it's almost as if it shows you what it could be like in the playoffs if you lose a guy of that stature, of that importance. What do you do? How do you respond? So between Evan and then also the young guys getting these opportunities like Craig Porter Jr., Tyrese Proctor, Jalen Tyson, with these players out and sidelined, they're almost okay with it because it's almost like a test. It's like a measuring stick for those guys to get thrown into the fire and figure it out. And I think that's honestly, even though it puts you behind the 8 ball to start the season, I think it's a good thing for those guys to experience that, especially since you're starting out on the road to start the year.
Yeah, I want to get into those young guys here in a second. I will say one other thing on the Darius front, though. I hope people have some patience with Darius, because to your point, he might miss these first 10 games just as they continue to sort of ramp him back up. And then he still might get out there in an actual game and still quite not be DG just yet. And that's okay. That is okay. He's going to need the game reps to kind of get himself back up to speed too. Watch him come out his first game and drop 40 points, and I have to eat these words. But which honestly I hope happens. But I'm just warning people, if DG comes out and he's off to a little bit of a slow start because he hadn't played an actual basketball game in quite some time, that's okay. It might just take some time to kind of get him fully back up to who he is. And like I said, you want him performing at the end of the season anyway, not right now. But you bring up the young guys, Spence, and I think that gets into an interesting point here because we've talked a ton about the starting lineup. We've talked a ton about DeAndre Hunter entering that starting lineup and what his role is going to kind of look like. I think we've seen some remnants of that already in the preseason, how important he's going to be to the success of this team as that two-way wing type player. We've talked a lot about the young guys kind of independently and how they fit into this picture and how somebody like Jalen Tyson could be like an X factor for them this year and so on and so forth. Those conversations are independent of each other, but they also intersect here a little bit because like you said, there is going to be a lot of these young guys, especially while DG is out, getting those reps early in the season. I think that's valuable. in terms of getting them prepped for more meaningful games late in the season, the potentially in postseason games that they end up having to play. Those reps all matter in the grand scheme of things. So that's going to be important for them to continue to see and get those guys out there. But I'm curious, like, as we've talked about the starting lineup, as we talked about those guys being worked in, how are you sort of approaching what the initial rotation is going to look like for Kenny Atkinson? I think we probably got our best taste of that last week in what he considered the final dress rehearsal game, obviously, against the Bulls, the Pistons, where he essentially, put out and went with his normal starting five. And then you saw Dean and Lonzo, the first guys off the bench. And then you sort of saw other guys get in as time went on. How do you sort of feel like he's going to deploy these guys, especially the young guys, in the early going of the season? And what is he going to show us with those rotations, you think, early on?
He's going to mix and match. I think putting the young guys with veterans who know what they're doing is essential. You want Craig Porter Jr. out there with guys like Donovan Mitchell and Lonzo Ball. I think it's the same thing for Tyrese Proctor. Those guys are kind of interchangeable. And maybe, hey, you have Craig out there with Tyrese and Lonzo, because Lonzo is basically 6'7". He's 6'6" with a really long wingspan and does really good things on the defensive end, right? So you can have a 3-guard lineup out there if you want to. We've also seen the incredibly big lineup where, DeAndre Hunter's playing the 2, Dean Wade's playing the 3. You have Larry Nance and Evan Mobley / Jared Allen there at the 5. So he's going to experiment. I think he's going to experiment. I think he's going to have more of a openness to put different combinations in. Like Donovan Mitchell and Evan Mobley aren't just going to be just Donovan Mitchell and Evan Mobley. Maybe Donovan plays with Jarrett a little bit more. And then, maybe Evan plays without Donovan on the floor, and he's going to try stuff is basically what I'm trying to get at. And that's what, again, this regular season is for, especially in October. You have to find out who plays well with who. That's really important.
Yeah.
For a guy like Jalen Tyson, being alongside veterans and guys who know what they're doing instead of playing those garbage time minutes at the end of the games last year and not really having too much chemistry with them and having a ton of inexperience as well. I feel like that's really going to help Jalen. I asked Kenny before the preseason finale what he thought of Jalen Tyson, like the good, the bad, the ugly. And he's like, really, I love that he's taking the threes. He's not making them right now, but in terms of being a role player and doing what we're asking of him, I gave him an A. That's what he told me. He said he gave him an A.
Yeah.
And that has to do with picking up full court, which a lot of these young guys, you're going to recognize this. Tyrese Proctor, Craig Porter Jr., Jalen Tyson, they are going to be utilizing them in full court defense situations. So keep an eye on that, Cavs fans, because that's almost reminiscent of what Indiana did to them in the playoffs last year. And I wonder if Kenny's saying, hey, you know what? If we're really well conditioned, we can do pretty much the same thing defensively. A lot of the young guys and the role players are going to be picking up full. So keep an eye on that because they're going to put pressure on the ball. They're going to try and create more opportunities on the fast break and in transition because of that pressure. So keep an eye on that. But it's really about putting them next to guys who know what they're doing. So they're not going to just be playing them with young guys aren't just going to be playing with young guys. They're going to be mixed in with the Donovan Mitchells, the Evan Mobleys, the Jared Allens, Dean Wade, like the guys who have been there and
even
done
Lonzo.
that. So
even Lonzo.
Yeah, even Lonzo. No, you're completely right on that. You're completely right on that. So it's all about their approach on that defensive end. But sticking with Jalen Tyson, he said at practice yesterday that it's going to be on him to not make mistakes. That's the biggest thing. He admitted that he's been sped up in practice and guys are telling him, you don't got to do all this and all that and all that. Like slow down a little. Slow down a little. You have a role. Play your role. It's that simple. And I think Jalen is starting to understand that in practices. It's going to take a minute in the games. You're going to probably see some poor shooting performances, but he's going to defend his ass off. He's going to be in there scrapping for loose balls. He said 50-50 balls for him should be 70-30 balls. I thought that was a fire quote, man. I loved that. And that's what Jalen brings to the table, man. He is a hard worker. He's been going at it since July. He's been in the gym the earliest. Him, Craig Porter Jr. have been working their butts off. Tyrese Proctor. These are the guys who are going to get an opportunity early on, and on the road in these environments, it's going to be very beneficial.
Yeah, I think that's well said. And I like the points you make there about how he'll deploy those young guys and probably want to pair them with some of these veterans. And I think that is going to be important because you're right. You're not going to see a lineup from Kenny that's just like Proctor and Tyson and and Craig Port, like all those guys on the floor
Tossing
necessarily
Naquan
together.
Tomlin out there
Right,
and Luke
right.
Travers, yeah.
Having them with some veterans who can kind of facilitate. And that's why I bring up Lonzo, because I think Lonzo, especially on that second unit, the way that he was used in that last preseason game was coming off the bench sort of as the guy who's leading that second group once they mix and match some guys. And so having somebody out there like that who can then, get the ball to Jalen in certain situations or get the ball to Tyrese in certain situations, I think that's going to be massive. And yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense in terms of the way that they're deployed. I'll be curious to see if what we saw in that preseason game sort of rings true, if Dean and Lonzo remain sort of the first guys up off the bench. But seeing when Jalen gets in is something I'm definitely going to monitor, because I think that is going to set the tone for, how much he's getting utilized and how quickly Kenny starts to even develop even more trust with him in actual games and want to turn to him more. Those are some early things I think people should be paying attention to. And I know that you mentioned this, but, Donovan even said these young guys are going to play. He said Jalen's going to play. He said Tyrese Proctor's going to play. That's notable. Like the star of the team, the main guy on the team is telling you they're going to depend on these guys. And I do think, Kobe's talked so much about developing on top of the roster, like the roster they've established and built with the core group of guys and all that. They want to still prioritize developing young guys because that's how you stay competitive. That's how you keep your team near the top of this league. And so they are prioritizing that, and it's going to be on these veterans to help get those guys up to speed a little bit, get them comfortable. So again, it's kind of a subplot to a year where the Cavs have these championship aspirations, but seeing how Jalen Tyson develops and Tyrese Proctor develops, those are key things I think that you'll want to sort of follow along with and monitor throughout the season without question.
Can they get to that Sam Merrill level? Because Sam Merrill now is going to be an everyday starter until those guys get back. So, it's the path you want to take. Get drafted and end up being molded into this piece of clay that turns into a rotational player. And Sam, you can even look at, like, he was the last pick of the draft when he went. So even it's guys like, Craig Porter Jr. and even Tyrese Proctor to an extent. Can you develop into an everyday rotational player like Sam Merrill has? It's a great example. Dean Wade, another great example. We've talked about the way that this organization has found diamonds in a rough, like Naquan Tomlin, another perfect, example to look at. So that's what it's about. You have to continue to develop these players as you're trying to win. And I think the Cavs are in a good spot nowadays to be able to do both at the same time. And you end up churning out some really, really good players. And I'm excited to see how those three in particular end up turning out. And I mean, based on Kenny Atkinson's player development track record, I would say none. I would not ever, doubt him.
That's an underrated point. Kenny has been great with that over his career. I didn't even think to mention that. That is
Brooklyn
a really
Nets days. Just even look at the Brooklyn Nets days.
I mean, how many times have I brought up the fact that he turned Brook Lopez and he made Brook Lopez extend his career because he helped him learn how to shoot threes. Al Horford, same thing. He helped Al Horford become a 3-point shooter who then goes to Boston and prolongs his career and wins a championship there. Like, those things are obvious throughout the different stops of Kenny Atkinson's tenure. And so I do think that plays a role for sure in this Cavs team. And that's a huge, huge piece of this as well. That's a really good point by you, Spence. I want to get into some of this fun stuff as we get sort of our season preview underway here a little bit. We're going to do 3 different sort of superlative awards: our MVP of just the Cavs, our unsung hero, and then our most improved player on this roster. And then, but off the MVP conversation, there's a bigger conversation to have as well. I'll let you go first on that, Spence. Who is going to be the MVP of this Cavaliers team for the 2025-26 season? I think I know where you're going.
I'm going to go a different direction than the obvious. I'm going to go Donovan Mitchell.
Okay.
Donovan Mitchell. I think now that Evan Mobley is being held to the standard he's being held to, and that Darius Garland, when he returns, is being held to the standard that he's being held to, Donovan's not going to take a step to the side anymore. It's not that he's going to be the go-to guy. Like, Evan has to be the one that's on the MVP trajectory as far as league MVP, the way that they've been hyping him up all summer long, all training camp long. But a lot of people are forgetting about Donovan on the court. And when I saw last Tuesday, as you were saying, he's already in peak shape. He's in midseason form, and it's barely getting into November. That is something I feel like can really get him back to his 30-point-a-night self. Is if the other guys are holding their part and doing their part, is Donovan Mitchell can be an MVP too. So I think that although his volume was up and he had taken a step back to watch the other guys develop last year, I think Donovan just gets back into that mode, that FU mode. We saw it in the playoffs. I'm not saying he's going to attack the rim 50 times a game and try to get to the line, 20 times. But I just think that he's going to have more of an edge to him. And Kenny said as much, that he's had just kind of this dog, this anger a little bit that he's bringing into the year. And I feel like everyone talks about Evan so much that, maybe he takes that some kind of way, even though he's the one that's propelling the narrative. I get that. And that's being a good teammate, but some good, healthy internal competition say, oh, he's going to get MVP. Don't forget about me. Don't forget about Donovan Mitchell, the guy that's been to multiple All-Star games and has the reputation that he has for a damn reason. So I'm going with Donovan, actually.
In some ways, I think that's like an obvious answer. And in some ways, I think that is like the off the path answer, which is what I like. I was actually prepared to say Donovan for the sake of content, because I thought you for sure were going to say Evan. But I'll take the Evan route. I'll take the Evan, because here's the thing. You're right. I commend Donovan a ton for his unselfishness over the years. I commend Donovan for still for having to navigate like when he has to take over, when he doesn't. I think he still is learning that to a degree. I think we saw that in the playoffs last year. And I do think, like, as things stand right now, he is without question still the best player on this team. And I think it all sort of still starts with him. But he also, like you said, is the guy perpetuating this narrative that Evan has to take that next leap. He has to become an MVP caliber player. And if they think he should become an MVP caliber player on an NBA wide scale, I don't know how he shouldn't be the MVP of this team. Like, if this team thinks that he's the key to going where they want to go, that he's the key to getting to an Eastern Conference Finals, beyond an Eastern Conference Finals, winning a championship, they frankly need him to take that step. And as much as I agree with you on Donovan and how I do think there's sort of that fire under him, especially him talking about how he was already in game shape, in August, because he was already starting to work and he's just that motivated after how last season ended. I think I've seen a lot of that from Evan too, as he continued to work on his game this summer. I get the sense that he's trying to find his voice even more and sort of demand that basketball a little bit more, which is part of the whole key of this evolution for him. He can't just take a back seat at times. He has to force the issue on, give me the ball, let me go to work, let me do my thing. We know Kenny Atkinson has plans to get the ball in his hands a little bit more and even bring the ball up the floor. We saw a little bit of that in the preseason, where even that last game, we both sort of said that, Evan and Jarrett can coexist better if Evan's going to operate outside the paint a little bit. And that was the part of the problem last year and why it felt like there was redundancy there. So I think you're starting to see some of those things. I think if this team's going to go where they need to go, Evan has to end up being the MVP. And that's no disrespect to Donovan, obviously, because I think Donovan is still going to be looked at as that guy for a lot of people because we just haven't seen it from Evan yet. But I think by the end of the season, you'll see Evan sort of grow into that role, and that when the season comes to an end, he'll be the reason that this team's going to go wherever they're going to go.
They can both finish like top 10 in the voting.
Well,
we'll revisit this. We'll revisit this.
That's
from that.
Yeah. Well, we were talking specific to the Cavs roster itself, but I think there is the bigger question at large here of like, can Evan get to that point? And I had an interesting conversation. I know he's your friend as well, Greg Schwartz of Bleacher Report, over the weekend. Over on 92 through the Fan. And I asked him the question, like, can Evan get to that level? And he, like, for everybody who's saying, like, yeah, he can, he's going to be great. Like, we're all excited about the potential of that for Evan. Greg actually pumped the brakes. And he said, look at the guys that are winning MVP. You got to be scoring like around 30 points a game. Do I think, and he kind of said, like, do I think Evan's going to go from scoring 18 points a game to all of a sudden being a 30-point per game guy? Like, no, I don't. So I don't know that I can put him in that MVP conversation yet. He was like, but I do think you'll see some progress. And maybe he's like, if he can get over 20, start scoring over 20 points a game, I think now we're talking about a guy trending in that direction. So I found that kind of interesting because he is right. Like, making a 12-point per game leap, especially on this team with the guys around him, is going to be difficult. And so, yes, they want him to be in that conversation. I think it's going to be a little easier said than done sort of scenario, though, here, because there's just so many mouths to feed on this team. And I don't know that Evan accelerates offensively that far, where he's like, doing what Shea, Gilgeous-Alexander, and Jokic are doing on a nightly basis necessarily.
He's capable of doing it. Is he capable of doing it every night? And and I think that is where you have to kind of temper your expectations from a 30-point per game scorer type of way. And a lot of the MVPs do just win, scoring titles and are looking at that stuff. But it just depends on how you vote for MVP. We've been over this before. There's no set criteria.
For sure.
But if you're an MVP of your team, I think that's a good way to start. And maybe that's the way that he takes that further leap, is by being the MVP of his team, and then you can talk about league-wide when you get done with that portion of it.
Well, you brought up the other part of this. Maybe him and Donovan are both like top 10 in voting, right? Like that makes it hard. That makes it hard too to be a league MVP when you have a guy on your own team who also can be in that conversation. You kind of poach votes from each other, and it's hard for people to look and say, can I really say this guy's the MVP of the league when he's got another guy who's also an MVP of the league right next to him? So in the grand scheme of things, that's probably a difficult ask, but the premise is that he can at least ascend into that conversation. We'll see if he can do that. All right, we go to the next one. Spence, who are you picking as the Cavs' unsung hero for the 2025-26 season?
Unsung hero. I gotta go with Sam Merrill. I think Sam's gonna play for the deal that he just made. I think he's gonna play even harder because trust from the organization and what he brought to the table for him to get that deal. I think he's gonna give them a little bit more, and that's just not in just addition to the defensive end where he really made his mark, and that's where Kenny likes him. I think he's going to get back to knocking down those shots because he's going to be well-conditioned. He's going to know what to expect. And now, in the back of my mind, I know I'm a rotational player. I don't have to have the ball weigh 1,000 pounds in my hand if I don't make shots because I know they're going to trust me on the other end of the floor. So now there's that lifted off of me. There's security lifted off of me. I just want a ball. I just want to hoop. And, he added a little bit of muscle. He's really good at drawing attention, moving throughout the half court because he's a shooting threat. He said he worked a lot on his intermediate game this year, so maybe we're going to see some Sam floaters this year instead of just some DG floaters. Maybe we're going to see a little bit more playmaking from Sam Merrill coming off of dribble handoffs. Maybe, he tosses up over the top to Evan Mobley or Jarrett Allen if they're setting screens up, at the top of the perimeter or in the middle of the floor. He has more ability than people think. And I think you're going to see him get downhill a little bit more this year, driving off of closeouts. I think you're going to see him knocking down his shots as per usual. He's going to defend. So I think a lot of people are banking on Sam having a bad year because he made all this money. Let's just also talk about the Bucks just paid AJ Green pretty much the same deal, maybe just even a little bit more money. And people were side-eyeing the Sam Merrill contract. The Bucks just did the same thing for AJ Green, who does very similar things. He's a little bit bigger. But I feel like that is a good measuring stick that Sam earned his money, but I don't think that he's going to take a step back because he's just making a lot of money.
Yeah, that's very fair. I like that answer a lot. My answer, I don't know, maybe people think that this player will be sung, and that's maybe this is a bad way to do this. I don't know. I mean, you could say like X Factor too. I kind of feel like unsung hero, X Factor are sort of in the similar buckets. And so for me, I'm going to go with DeAndre Hunter. Maybe he's a little less unsung just because he's surrounded by the core four. Like when you talk about the Cavs, the guys that draw the most of the attention, of course, are like Donovan, Evan, Darius, even Jared to a degree. He's kind of like the fifth wheel of that group, right, in the starting lineup. But the reason I say he's going to be the unsung hero or sort of the X factor on this team is I just think for how long we waited for this Cavs team to get a two-way wing that could be versatile for you on both ends of the floor. It's still very much a wing-led league. Him in the starting lineup, him with Kenny scheming things up for him this summer, like I think he's just going to get unlocked to a different level that the Cavaliers really need and the Cavaliers can really bank on, and I'm excited to see it. As much as we talk about Evan being the key to get them further in the playoffs and to reach their goals, I think DeAndre sort of falls into that bucket a little bit as well, because like they need a player like that, and him now playing more minutes and being part of the starting lineup, I think is that next step for him. I'm excited to see it. I think he becomes such an important piece of what this Cavs team is going to do this year if they're going to have success.
I'm just glad that everyone's hopping on the bandwagon, because this is the stuff that I was talking about exactly after last year's playoff exit when we were on one of the podcasts.
Yeah.
I'd love to go back and listen to it, but everyone's like kind of just on the same wavelength as me now. I honestly,
I've been there with you, because at the end of the season, I said, like, I'm curious to see how he uses DeAndre next year, because it's hard when you're a trade deadline acquisition coming to a team that won 60 games, right? Like it's just a different scenario. So I was equally as excited about the possibilities here. I'll give you credit for being first, but I was right there with you in terms of like wanting to see what this looked like with DeAndre as a member of the starting lineup.
Man had to come to his defense, but no, I think I know. I'm making fun of all the podcasters that say
I know some ball.
I'm making fun of all the podcasters that go, I was right. But no, seriously, my bold prediction this year is I think DeAndre Hunter makes an All-Star game. That's my bold prediction this year.
I like that.
So
I like that a lot.
We'll see what it's like though. Because we didn't get to this, but he did bump knees with Tobias Harris in the preseason finale.
That's right.
He might not even be available for the preseason opener, because they're going to take that a little bit more cautiously. Did some individual work on Monday, but nothing 5-on-5, no contact. So we'll see what happens. Practice happens on Tuesday, and then they'll travel to New York on Tuesday. So we'll see where it's at. But hopefully, Kenny said he's moving well, but too early to tell was his exact words when it comes to DeAndre's status for the opener.
Okay, good to know. I like that bold prediction. We have one more superlative we want to get to, which is the most improved player spin for the 2025-26 season.
Most improved.
I'll just say mine now. I'm going with Jalen. I actually thought about Sam Merrill as a secondary to this, because I liked especially your point on in the starting lineup, at least to start the year, the payday he got, playing well off of that and sort of proving his worth, if you will. I think he's in line for this award potentially as well. But I'm going with Jalen because I've spent the last month talking about how he's going to be important to this team, how he's going to play a lot more minutes, how he's going to be part of the rotation. And I think you're going to see those improvements as time goes on. He probably isn't the best shooter on the team by any stretch right now, but seeing how he improves offensively throughout the year and how he still impacts the game in other ways, kind of like Max Strus does sometimes when he's having a cold night, I think is what I'm looking for. And I do think we'll get to the end of the season and feel like, he really improved his game, and he's going to be a part of this team moving forward that they sort of rely on and depend on. So I'm going to go with Jalen on this one.
My answer is twofold. I think Evan Mobley, for obvious reasons. We kind of
That's
already
fair.
went over that. We already went over that. Just the degree of evolution that he's going to have, I think just puts him in that conversation. But to go on your wavelength in terms of the young guys, Craig Porter Jr., man. Kenny talked all offseason long about how he has taken the conditioning program seriously. It's about Craig going from in good shape into elite shape. And there's a difference. There's a true difference between the two. And Craig, I thought the most insightful thing he said was the best players perform well when they're tired. And he's prepared himself for those scenarios, for those situations. If you saw in the preseason opener, he was on fire from beyond the arc, really worked on that outside shot, but also just attacking the rim, involving others. And we've talked about this all the time. He's really just someone that plays above his size. He plays like Alonzo Ball, to be completely honest. He is someone that goes up and gets rebounds. He tries to block shots. You can probably get by him defensively, but he's going to recover. He has a lot to offer. And he's going to play a big role for this team. Probably going to be in, that 15-minute increments or whatever they need him out there for. But he's going to get an opportunity. And we know that Craig, when he gets an opportunity, usually takes advantage of it. So I think with an established role, and again, it goes back to the Sam Merrill thing. I don't got to be looking over my shoulder. Not while DG's out, at least. Not while Max is out, at least. So he's not going to be looking over his shoulder. He's going to be playing like he's a part of the team. So it's going to be him, it's going to be Tyrese, and Lonzo as this three-headed monster to try and supplement and make up for the loss of a Darius Garland, and to a greater extent, the loss of a Ty Jerome. By the way, feel terrible for Ty and his calf strain, not being able to play for at least a month for the Grizzlies. Hope he gets well soon. But it's going to be by committee. But I think Craig is going to be a huge part of that. And I'm looking forward to see him because he looked smooth as hell in preseason for sure.
Yeah. All right. Final thing. Prediction for the season. Like, I mean, I'm not even saying you got to do like a win. This isn't like the NFL. Like, we're not going to do like, oh, they're going to be 10-6 or 10-7. I guess it's 10-7 now because there's 17 games. Like I'm talking like, you know, we know that last year, second straight year ending disappointingly in the second round of the playoffs. Is this finally the year, Spence, in an Eastern Conference that's banged up? We know that. Pretty wide open in the grand scheme of things. Cavs are one of the favorites to win the NBA Finals this year, particularly out of the Eastern Conference. Is this the year they finally get over that hump? They get to the Eastern Conference Finals. Do you have them going any further? Can they be an NBA Finals team? Lock it in. Where's your head at with how this season goes?
I think they end up getting to the ECF. They fall short in like 6 games, something like that. But it's, again,
to the Knicks?
I don't know what team. I'm higher on most than Milwaukee. Honestly, I think people a lot are writing of people forget about Milwaukee. Yeah, but it would probably be either Milwaukee or New York, as if you would look at least just from a wide lens. I just think it takes a whole other level to change the stage. I know they haven't gotten past the second round the last couple of years. I think they do that this year, and I think that's a big step. I think getting to your conference finals is another ballgame. And then it's another level to get to the finals. It's tough for me to see them getting to the NBA finals, but I think it's a really big step if they get to the conference finals. Now, I'm not saying they're not capable. I think they're capable of winning a championship.
Yeah.
I just think it's tough. It's tough. Especially, okay, say they do get to the NBA finals. The Thunder are probably going to be there waiting. Right?
Yeah.
So, are you better than the Thunder yet? I don't know. I don't think so.
That's the big holdup for me when it comes to the finals part of this. Like, I want to say they'll get to the finals, but I don't know. I think no matter what, I can't. I'm not willing to sit here in October and say they're going to win it all, because I think if you get the Thunder out of the West, I mean, that team's a juggernaut, and as long as they're motivated and they're healthy, I don't know that I'm going to like pick them to beat them in a series, and that's just kind of the reality of it. Do I think they can get out of the East? Absolutely. My big question is that, like, do I think Mike Brown is like, I think Mike Brown is a good coach. I don't know that I think like if he gets into a matchup with Kenny Atkinson that he's just going to be like, you know, just like that he's going to be running circles around Kenny Atkinson. I think Kenny's a really good coach in his own right. So I think about that part of this where I'm like, if it's Knicks, Cavs in the Eastern Conference Finals. But the big part for me, Spence, and why I'm going to sort of have the same prediction here of, I think they get to the Eastern Conference Finals. I think they probably lose in like 7 games, especially because I do think that I don't think they win the 60 games that they did last year. And so I think maybe they end up as like the number 2 team in the East. And I don't think they necessarily care as much about having that number 1 spot. And so I think they might end up going like to New York, for example, in an Eastern Conference Finals. And I just think like the Knicks have already been on that stage. The Knicks have a little bit more pedigree in the playoffs and experience there. The Knicks also, it's the physicality thing for me. Like, I still think you saw, and I hate to do this because I don't want to do like the low-hanging fruit thing, but they've gotten better over the years of playing in those moments and on that stage. But I still have questions because they got pushed around by Indiana. And Indiana out-physicaled them in the style of play that they had. And so if they prove to me throughout the season that they can play at that higher pace and all that, I think I'll start to believe it a little bit more. But I'm just a little hesitant at this point to believe that they'll get all the way to the finals and get out of this Eastern Conference. But I am saying they get to the Eastern Conference Finals, yes.
Yeah, no, I mean, I guess you could call me a coward for that, but I feel the same way. I do think we're going to see a mean streak out of Evan. I think Evan will get that physicality portion of his personality into this. I think also in a situation like that, you can toss out Thomas Bryant. You can toss out Larry Nance Jr. They were not part of this team last year, so that's different, I think. I think there's a competitive streak to a guy like Lonzo Ball. Tyrese Proctor has been called Joe Ingles-like by Donovan Mitchell. So they have options now. They have options in terms of that stuff with that MF in that locker room.
And that matters. And I do think that that's going to be important. I think for me, and I think for a lot of Cavs fans, it's about sort of like showing us that it's different, showing us and earning that trust that it's going to be a little bit different this year. I still have all the faith in the world in this team making a deep run, competing for a championship. I just think on that stage, I'm a little hesitant right now to say they've totally come out on top. But I hope they prove me wrong. I'm sitting here today saying I hope they prove me wrong. All right, Spence, that's going to do it for us. We will talk to you again tomorrow, Wednesday, before the game, also after the game. We'll both be in New York for Knicks Cavs to kick off the season. Really excited about it. We'll document our journeys, I'm sure, together. So make sure you follow along over at the Cleveland Cavaliers Roundtable, roundtable.io/sports/NBA/Cavaliers for any of our written stuff. But also, if you haven't done so already, subscribe to this channel, Cavaliers Roundtable, like the podcast, Courtside with the Cavs, and make sure you follow along with us all season long. Thank you so much. We are looking forward to kicking off the season in New York tomorrow night. Until then, keep on following along with all things Cavaliers, the Cavaliers Roundtable.